Hello and welcome back to another video on the Who Guy channel, where today we are reviewing episode 3, yes, the Well of season 2 of Doctor Who. And if you haven't watched already, go watch it because there's going to be a bunch of spoilers in this review. I'm going to go through the good, the bad, and then give you my overall opinions on the episode. And if you're not already, make sure to subscribe down below. And if you've enjoyed this video, smash that like button. And ignore the backdrop. Yes, I'm in the process of rejigging my collection around a bit, so just ignore that. But let's get straight into the review. Overall, I've got to say this episode is really, really good. Quite a few nitpicks that I do have with this episode, but the overall enjoyment of this episode was quite a bit. I did like it. It does get hampered down by a couple of things, and mostly that's to do with that this is a sequel to Midnight. I cannot believe we are finally getting a sequel to that one episode in season 4 of Doctor Who, which is one of the best episodes of Who ever. I never thought we would ever get a sequel to it. Did it need a sequel? Not really. Am I happy there is a sequel? Yeah.
Proper confused? I'm way beyond confused.
Being a fan of that original episode, when the Midnight Entity was kind of revealed to us in this episode, I was a bit scared that they might muck up maybe the lore or muck up that previous episode, and I think they did quite well not to. There are little bits that I wasn't best pleased with in contrast to that previous episode. However, I think they dealt with it pretty well. I don't think it ruins Midnight really. And really, thinking about it, all they did with the Midnight Entity is chuck it off the bus. They didn't really kill it as such, so it makes sense that it's back here. I love the way that the planet is now not made of diamonds. Those have all been mined out. That was a good excuse to the start of the episode, where we get this kind of dead looking planet which looks like it's been deserted and mined the hell out of. And it makes sense. Everyone wants diamonds, so it does make sense there's none left. But it's really cool that that Midnight Entity was still living in that planet. And the whole thing about that the Midnight Entity came from that well made that well kind of scary. I almost thought this episode was going to be to do with the Satan pit, just with the pit, the well. So Rose Ayling-Ellis was playing. I thought she might play a similar role with the guy with the writing on his face from that Satan pit episode. But then it turned into a Midnight episode and I was even more ecstatic. I think mostly it was done well. I think this was a real nice dark episode for Ncuti. He hasn't had many dark episodes. This one is one for him to shine, and I think he shined. His emotions came through. He cried again. Everyone doesn't like that, but I think he had reason to, because he was definitely scarred back in the day. David Tennant's Doctor definitely was. Made sense here. Not sure how the entity knew his name, but he did. That was kind of cool. Kind of harked back to the kind of Stephen Moffat years. And we got loads of music in this episode as well, harking back to that Midnight episode, which I did really like. I think this season is a massive step up in the audio bit of this season. I think the hints of previous themes being muddled in with the new themes, I just think is so much superior. Murray Gold's doing a fantastic job with that. Of course, just like Midnight, this was set pretty much in one room. Yes, it was a bigger room than that kind of coach bus tram thing that they had on Midnight, but I think it still worked the same, that they were kind of in this room. They wanted to just keep her in this room, make sure the entity didn't get out, and finding a way to defeat it really. And I really like the kind of clock aspect. The name Midnight actually comes into effect with the clock striking 12. I like the whole idea of the Midnight Entity being behind someone. When we get into the bad section, I'll get into the actual nitty gritty bits about that Midnight Entity, because there's a few things that they've changed that I don't really like and doesn't really make too much sense. But overall, this episode, a decent sequel to Midnight. Of course, it's not going to hit that top episode, but I still think it worked well. And I really wasn't expecting it. Cast in this episode was just as strong as that cast from that previous Midnight episode. I think everyone did a fantastic job. Ncuti included, the emotion he showed towards the Midnight Entity and being genuinely scared. And Belinda, yes, played by Vardra, she did a fantastic job once again. She's really getting into her nurse aspect. Every episode she seems to be able to heal or help someone. Seeing her get used to that futuristic medicine and med pack. But she didn't have too much to do in this episode. But I love the bit where the Midnight Entity was behind her and was latching on, and she looked genuinely scared. Shia, her death was impactful. It didn't really mean much if you watched till the end of the episode. There was a little hint that the Midnight Entity is still around, which I did like, but it kind of made her death quite redundant. Love that chase scene where she's running to just jump into the well and take herself out with the entity with her, and the Doctor's trying to catch up and basically tell her no, there'd be another way, but there didn't seem to be another way. And to be honest, that's another thing wasn't too great about this episode, that it didn't really mean anything. Her death was pointless because it's still around. I think Rose Ayling-Ellis did a fantastic job in this episode, especially the sign language in this episode was really dealt well. I thought it worked well. The kind of speech bubbles that were coming out, they had to press that little button on their costume. But also the Doctor knows loads of languages, and of course he was going to know sign language, so I can assume deaf people, people that use sign language, are going to be really happy that the Doctor can use it, and it just makes sense, and I think that's really, really cool that the Doctor does. A lot of the other crew didn't seem to know, and that luckily they had that language translator on them, because if they didn't, that would have been a very sticky situation. Maybe we should all learn sign language, because it really does make a difference. And that scene with the Doctor turning his back on her and her getting upset, I thought that was really cool and really definitely delved in deep to what actually it's like to be deaf. I really do like how that was dealt. I think Rose did a fantastic job, and I don't think we'll ever see her back in Who. She had the old space helmet as well. That was pretty cool. But yeah, I don't think we'll see her back in Doctor Who, but it was a nice little star guest. I love also how this season is continuing on with the story by story. So we end an episode and we start it straight after. They're in the same costumes. I hope this continues. It gives kind of like a linear story than the previous season where we kind of jumped months, didn't we, with Ruby, which was a bit weird. So I do like how this is continuing on. It does make me worry about Doctor Who media though, such as the books that are coming out. Are they going to have the Vindicator in? We've seen in Doctor Who magazine that they are using the Vindicator. So as long as the Vindicator is in each media, whether that's Big Finish, books and stuff like that, if the Vindicator's in it and it kind of suggests that this is another place that they're stopping off, I think it makes sense. Sorry about that, but I think they've got it right, with especially with Doctor Who magazine having that in, so I would assume the books would too. It gives us a nice linear story throughout this season. Of course, Mrs. Flood had to come into this episode as always. Didn't really know how she was going to fit into this one, the leader of that group, and they thought she sent the Doctor, but of course, I think she's a big bad, so I don't think she did send the Doctor. And she definitely wanted to learn that the Doctor was using that Vindicator. And I like the Earth teases of them not knowing what Earth is and the human race. I think that's really cool. This whole build-up of maybe Earth has been erased. And will this mean Belinda will be erased? Who knows? Loads of good about this episode. It was a good episode. I have a couple of bad things, so let's get straight into that. These bad things don't really change much about this episode. I don't think it was an episode destroyer. I think these are just nitpicks because I love Midnight so much. My main gripe with this episode is the way they changed the Midnight Entity. The way we got to see it, which we haven't really seen it before. So it was different in that aspect, which I think was quite unique to the Midnight Entity, is that we've never seen it, and then we're kind of getting this hint of a monster. If you've seen Doctor Who Unleashed as well, we actually see a model of it. So I don't know how to feel about it. I'm still undecided in my mind. Initial reactions though, I'm not too happy about it. I quite liked how Midnight was not seeable. With the Nat Vashta Narada, you could kind of see it with the shadows. With the Weeping Angels, obviously the statues. So something like this was something unique, and now we're kind of getting this hint that we're going to see it. Kind of makes it very similar like other Doctor Who villains. And I think that was one of the main things that I loved about the Midnight episode, is that you never actually get to see it. Loads more powers than it did in the previous Midnight episode. Of course, we had it taking control of people. This time it's an actual thing sitting behind the person. So I don't know why it didn't actually just take over the people. Yeah, the effects were cool where we were getting people flung away, bashed against a wall. They were quite gruesome deaths, so I did like that, but it didn't feel Midnight Entity. I think the whole point of the Midnight Entity was that it gets into the people's minds and it kind of creates chaos. And in this episode, it did create a bit of chaos, especially at the start where we see the deaths of the crew. But it was more attacking the people one by one itself, then actually getting into the people's heads. It was quite a big departure from that previous episode, which I wasn't too keen on. And of course, I don't think you're ever going to beat that Midnight story. I just think it's such a good self-contained story that adding this extra layer to it it's almost always going to make that episode just a little bit worse now. Not going to destroy the episode for me, but knowing that there are extra things to this Midnight Entity, I think kind of does lose that specialness from that episode. The pacing was a bit off in this episode as well. I thought it was really slow at the start. Then loads of things happened. The Doctor seemed to quickly, and he was quite joyous that he found a way to beat it. And with David Tennant, he really didn't find a way to beat it. The 10th Doctor really struggled with that, and you could see that in his emotions. And then Ncuti just an idea straight away. It does kind of make that first episode a bit redundant. Ncuti was so upset and angry, and then all of a sudden he was happy. That was a bit weird, the kind of tone shifting. I don't know what it is, but Russell really likes to use white people as the annoying character. I'm not going to get into discrimination or anything, but we're seeing a lot of the kind of white males being not the main villains of the story, but being the characters that are making the plot move on, making the audience hate them almost. We had it in the Robot Revolution, and we've kind of got it here. And another kind of nitpick I had with this episode was the rules of this Midnight Entity, that it always had to be behind a person. Yet Shia turned away from them all and was faced away from the group when she ran away, so that kind of meant that they were behind her. So why didn't the Midnight Entity get them? Not too sure what happened there. And finally, just a real minor nitpick, that scene again where they change their clothes. Although cool, we've seen it now 3 times. I don't think we really need to see a scene like that again. And the fact that they had exact replica suits in the TARDIS, I just found really convenient. The Doctor didn't even know what planet he landed on, because if he did, I don't think he would have gone out again. It was really off for me how he had exact replica suits. Just seemed a bit weird and convenient. But apart from that, I think that's the only few nitpicks I have. And overall, I'm going to give this episode an 8 out of 10 because it's still one of the top tier Doctor Who episodes. Yes, I've got loads of nitpicks, but they're nitpicks. There's nothing really in this episode that I hated. It's a decent addition to that Midnight episode. What did you guys think? Comment down below. As always, like the video and subscribe. Comment down below 3 words that you would describe this episode. Would describe this episode as spooky, surprising, and eerie. I've been the Who Guy, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.
And I want you home by midnight.